Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have an Amouage full review. Probably a Hall of Fame review if you love Amouage as much as I do. You know, I was thinking a lot about some of the different Amouages that have not been given full reviews on my channel yet. Things like Gold Man, I mean, where everything started. Things like Fate Man, things like Bracken, Sunshine Man. You know, there are a lot more Amouage reviews still to come, believe it or not, that I have not done. We still have the Opus line from Opus 9, Opus 10, things like that are coming up very soon. So lots more Amouage content to come for those of you who love my Amouage content. And I love making it because I love wearing Amouage. Actually, I am going to do a fresh spray and reapply because this is my scent of the day. The day before the 4th of July here in the United States, and actually my sister's birthday, so happy birthday, sis. But today we're going to talk about a fragrance called Dia Man, and I have a couple different versions. I do have the non-magnetic cap version. I also have the magnetic cap version. I smell almost no difference between it at all that I can just determine. I've tested both. I've compared them. There's no need for a comparison video because they are almost identical to me. These are the 100 ml bottles. And so I feel like, so this came out in 2002, by the way. Bertrand Duchaufour, the Magician, the Maestro, is the Parfumeur. I feel like many reviewers, and I'm guilty of this as well, I must admit, we are guilty of spraying a fragrance, sticking our nose into it, and trying to kind of psychoanalyze every little detail of the perfume. Sometimes that works on some fragrances. Sometimes it doesn't. To me, Dia Man is one of those fragrances that it does not work on. This is not a fragrance that you can stick your nose in, deep into your hand, bury your nose in your hand, and break down every little note and detail that you're going to get. You have to let this fragrance come to you. This is one of those fragrances you would be doing yourself a disservice if you sprayed it, smelled it, and went, nope, not for me. Because this fragrance needs to be worn, it needs to be experienced. It's a feeling, it's a vibe. Dia Man to me is an aura. You know, it's a very elegant aura. It's one of Amouage's most elegant scents as far as I'm concerned. And as a lover of vintage and heavy perfumery from the old days, the 70s and 80s and all that good stuff, and you know I like my perfume strong. The biggest knock against Dia Man instantly right out of the gate is its lack of projection and strength, okay? The sillage, all of that stuff on Dia gets absolutely knocked by some reviewers. I disagree that it's a disadvantage, though, because I 100% disagree with that, because I think for the folks who claim it's a downside, I don't think they understand that Dia Man, it's something that in a normal fragrance may be a weakness, but in Dia Man, it's actually a strength. And I have a 4-hour dry down right here. 4-hour dry down. Oh, it's beautiful. The dry down is truly where it's at with this fragrance. That's the other thing. That's why first impressions have such limited value to me, and I do very few of them. I have some blind sniff videos up on the channel and stuff like that, but for me, spraying something and smelling it, this could be one of those fragrances where someone makes the fatal error of spraying it, smelling it, and going, nope, and just moving on, not letting it really progress. This is one you really have to let it progress and turn into the beautiful scent that it's going to become. So, just one thing to mention, by the way. One of my, and I actually pulled out the box for you guys. I dusted the dust off, but I pulled out the box because I wanted to show you this. I have two versions. Amouage Perfumery LLC, which is the version previous to it becoming the Amouage SAOC, or sorry, Amouage SAOC. That's what some of the newer Amouage bottles say right there. Amouage SAOC. I don't know if you can see right, that very small print down under Eau de Parfum. And so the Amouage Perfumery LLC bottoms look like this. They just had kind of a printed number with nothing else written on the bottom. And then before that, it was literally just Sultanate of Oman. It was the Sultanate of Oman owned Amouage. So they've gone through a couple different iterations, if you will. I can smell no difference in the smells, but I wanted to, in the bottles that I have anyways. Now, I think these bottles are both very close to each other because the way Amouage is written on the bottle, almost in this raised sort of text that you can feel. They've changed some of the way that Amouage is written on some of the newer bottles. And so if you have some newer bottles, you'll be able to know exactly what I'm talking about. But I want to describe this scent first in maybe a little bit of a metaphor, because for me, Dia in many different languages is an iteration of either day. Dia means day. It can also mean light. It can mean the sun. I've heard all kind of different things, but day is kind of the main thing that I think most people kind of focus on. But in many different languages, dia can mean somewhere in the proximity of, let's say, day or light or sun or what I always imagine when it comes to dia is being in a room, pitch black, with a solitary candle being sort of lit off in the distance. And you can see nothing except for that one candle flicker. And that candle is far away at first. You're in this dark room. All of your attention, your instincts, you're on pins and needles. You're attuned to this one sort of light, this solitary flicker of light, if you will. The closer you get, the more you focus on the light and not just the dark around you, okay? The closer you get, the more the waxy elements of the candle just seem to like melt into the air that you're smelling. So it's almost like you can smell this candle. It's an unscented candle, but it's almost like you can smell it. The air gives off this waxy element to it, and it just kind of melts into the air that you're smelling. It's like being attacked by a poltergeist. Like imagine a ghost or something attacks you and leaves this residue in the air. The closer you get, the more the flicker of the candle changes your whole perception of the room. So sometimes if the candle flickers this way, maybe you'll catch a shadow or something that wasn't there before. You are also vaguely aware, almost like this cold thought in the back of your brain that you try to push away, that the closer you get to the candle, it's almost like you can feel this slight ray of warmth emanating from the candle. Obviously, the candle is not going to keep you cold, or keep you warm from the cold. It's one solitary flame, right? But the closer you get to the light, the warmer and warmer you feel. It's almost like your brain is imagining this warmth emanating from the light, okay, from the day, from the light. Sometimes being very detail-oriented, sticking your nose into your hand, smelling a fragrance, getting every little detail is exactly what the doctor ordered, okay? That's what a particular fragrance needs. I just wanted to offer kind of a musing on how my brain sees Dia Man. When I wear Dia Man, someone described it to me this way once, and I've never been able to get it out of my head. The image of that candle in the dark room will probably do a better job of kind of telling you how I perceive Dia Man than any other distinct note breakdown or anything else that I can kind of give you on the scent. But let's dive into the details. So Dia Man is classified as a woody, spicy floral fragrance, okay? The current Amouage website calls it a chypre. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about that, but just call it a chypre femelle, okay? So when you're digging your nose into your arm with Dia Man, and you do what I was telling you not to do, especially in the opening, especially when I first sprayed, you're going to get these very soft, almost cinnamon-like, melted cinnamon over cardamom-like spice, okay? And it gives this contrast of sort of cooling and fresh at the same time, and this lovely bitter orange begins to make an appearance, okay? Bitter orange and frankincense, okay? So bigarade, if you will, and frankincense. And if you go back to my image of the candle, the frankincense is just soft enough here to where it can be used in such a manner where it can both pay homage to the history and culture of the House of Amouage and also be like this almost like perfect representation of the slight smoke that comes off of a candle when a breeze or shift in the air kind of makes the flame bend this way or that way. And in just that moment, you catch a hint of smoke wafting from the candle. So imagine you're sitting in this room, all of a sudden, because of how the air shifts, the flame flickers this way, or it flickers that way. And you sort of see this little tendril of smoke emanate off of the flame. Other than that, it goes back to being smooth, no smoke. It burns clean, if you will. That's how the frankincense weaves its way in and out of this perfume. You're going to get it now in the opening, mixed with spices. The bitter orange makes an appearance, and it is beautiful. That bitter orange note is beautiful. Jean-Claude Elena did the women's version of Dia Woman. Bertrand Duchaufour did the men's version of Dia Man. And it's interesting that Jean-Claude Elena, who so loves bitter orange, did the women's version, but it was Bertrand Duchaufour that used the bitter orange in Dia Man to such perfection here. It's just fascinating to me how both of these masters of perfumery, Jean-Claude Elena and Bertrand Duchaufour, seem to be kind of at the top of their game right around this time and over the next 5 to 10 years, if you will. And just a few years later, after Dia Man in 2004, Jean-Claude Elena would release Terre d'Hermes with that bitter orange note. and that actually Bertrand Duchaufour used in Dia Man. Not that there is a connection, but just an interesting musing. I find it fascinating. And at this point in time, Bertrand Duchaufour was also at the top of his game, and everything he touched seemed to be created in this way that was unique and special. And he used materials and notes and ingredients in a way that to me is revolutionary. I don't think any perfumer has used these type of different ingredients that you just wouldn't expect to go together, different notes. We're going to talk about a couple in here, but if you think about things like Jubilation 25, one of his greatest creations, he used that blackberry note to perfection. If you think about something like Timbuktu, which I think Timbuktu heavily inspired Terre de Hermes, and it was a few years before Terre de Hermes, if I'm not mistaken, there was a use of green mango in Timbuktu. They're not exactly the same, obviously, but I do think that heavy use of Isoe Super in Timbuktu inspired Terre de Hermes. And this green mango note, though, is used in Timbuktu. And if you know Dzongkha, also a Bertrand Duchaufour creation, which I'll review all of these one of these days, just a matter of getting around to it. I like to take my time with these, and when the time is right to review them, I like to discuss them. But Dzongkha uses this lychee note also with peony, but that was from 2006. That was 4 years after Dia Man, if you will, okay? So 4 years after Dia Man. And so his fascination with peony, with the peony flower, started in 2002 with Dia Man. And I would consider Dia and Dzongkha two reference peony fragrances, in my opinion. There's not very many, actually, fragrances that use this peony note, especially to such perfection as Bertrand Duchaufour. The fact that both of them are done by Duchaufour tells you he was really playing with something. He had an idea, he had a concept, he had something that kind of felt like the light came on, the candle was lit, the fuse was burning. And so peony as a flower is native to Asia and to the Mediterranean, and its scientific name is Paeonia. It's known for its very large, the flowers are huge. I mean, they're like the size of your head. And fragrant flowers, they come in many different, very interesting and different colors, but the smell is slightly sweet, slightly floral, slightly rose-like, but it has one of the most naturally beautiful smells on a flower I've ever smelled. It does come with downsides though, okay? So this very beautiful floral is one of the most quiet, one of the softest flowers you'll ever smell. It's not mute, but it's extremely soft. It's not like the camellia flower where it's mute, but it's extremely soft. So if you've ever smelled a real peony, you almost have to like bury your nose into it to smell how beautiful the smell really is. The idea of a flower so soft, it's almost mute, but once again, once you smell it, the beauty is rivaled by almost none. It's one of the most beautiful florals I think you'll ever smell. It's so beautifully and expertly done in Dia Man. It all ties together in what I was saying at the start of the review. So Bertrand Duchaufour basically created a fragrance in Dia Man that you have to experience its aura, okay? It's a vibe. Dia Man is a feeling, it's a vibe, it's an aura that you live with. And he created it as your body heats up, kind of moves and changes with your body temperature and blends in with your body and creates this aura of a smell. But he highlighted a flower that is the exact opposite, that you almost have to bury your nose into the flower to even smell because it's so soft. You could be right next to it and you won't smell it. So contrast is beautiful in perfume, but it's also beautiful in perfume creation. And I really think Bertrand Duchaufour is like the maestro. He's like the master, the magician when it comes to blending these incongruous notes that you wouldn't expect them to go together, and just he kind of makes them sing in harmony as if they were neighbors and they were meant to be together forever. So as the hours tick by with Dia Man, you're going to notice a few very small details, but very important to stress that as the fragrance wears, you have to keep in mind that this is a soft fragrance, okay? It is one of the reasons why I think many people write off Dia Man, and which I don't think it's fair to how beautiful Dia is. Which, by the way, I love these boxes. I wish Amouage went back to these. I know I'm a sucker for the old Amouage, everything old Amouage, but these old boxes were fantastic. And I really think that they are a million times better than the new boxes, but I miss these. This was good stuff by Amouage back then. But you have to keep in mind that this wears soft. So when I talk about some of these notes, especially the heavier ones, like we're going to talk about things like leathers and vetiver and patchouli and stuff like that, you have to keep in the back of your mind, this fragrance was made for elegance and style and class, okay? So think about some soft fragrances and how they wear. That's kind of how Dia wears. Although sometimes Dia will surprise you, especially into the dry down, because most people expect when you spray the fragrance for it to hit you heaviest right there at the beginning. Dia doesn't really work that way on my skin. Dia, sometimes you spray, and like this spray that I just did in front of you guys for the camera 15 minutes ago, it starts off so, like I said, almost melted smooth cinnamons and cardamoms and soft spice and soft florals. And I don't want to say it grows in strength, but sometimes as it dries, you expect it to get softer and softer. Dia doesn't. Dia is pretty stable. So even though it starts soft, it stays soft, but it stays pretty monotone, okay? But you have to keep in mind the fragrance was designed that way. It's not like, oh, you got a bad batch or anything like that. Most people who are comparing it to Interlude Man, which I also still have to review on the channel, if you're looking for a screamer, if you're looking for something where you walk in and every girl in the room turns their head and looks at you, this is not that. This is the exact opposite of that, actually. So as the hours tick by, in my mind, the way I think of the florals here is they literally melt together. Go back to my candle analogy in the opening. Imagine when the wax melts from the candle, right? Literally, imagine the wax melting on the candle, and think about it in your head. Could you separate this piece of wax from this piece once it actually all melts together? No, that's the way that the florals seem to kind of come together. It's like a similar setup as the hours tick by. The florals seem to just kind of blend into this beautifully heavenly narcotic floral with that Middle Eastern tint because of the frankincense kind of weaving in and out. And you start to notice little details. So for example, you're going to notice things like vetiver. You're going to notice leather beginning to play more and more of a prominent role. There is also labdanum, which the Amouage website makes mention of a Chypre creation, which, as I said, I'll read you the blurb too, because it's kind of funny just to kick the shit on. But they say it's a Chypre construction, and it's honestly, it's one of the most bland, unartistic write-ups for a niche fragrance I have ever read. The write-up is so bad, it almost makes me think they don't want people to buy Dia Man. Like they want you to buy the new, what is it called? Blue Oud or Oud Blue, whatever the hell Amouage is. I reviewed it on the channel. You can go check it out from a sample. The one that's like $500. Like they don't want you to buy Dia. They want you to buy the one that's twice as much or one of the exceptional extras. So listen to this pathetic write-up. An eclectic Chypre inspired by the natural wonders of Oman, Dia Man is a prime example of tasteful subtlety. That's the write-up. It's like, you know, maybe at least try and seem like you are putting any effort into this at all. It's like, okay, we're done. Let's go to the bar. So I don't know what to say other than they should be ashamed of themselves, in my opinion. But yes, it is technically a Chypre Accord, but there's no bergamot. There's no oak moss listed, although we'll talk about this kind of weird oak moss substitute that I think you will get as Dia dries down. So I probably personally, if I was writing the write-up for Dia Man, I would not have highlighted this Chypre Accord because it doesn't really smell anything like a traditional Chypre that I could think of. Like, you know, there are like traditional leather Chypres and traditional floral Chypres and all this stuff. This is not one that falls into that category. This is kind of like a totally unique creation. It almost comes from the mind of the Maestro, Bertrand Duchaufour, the magician. And it's much more a Bertrand Duchaufour work. And if you've smelled his work with things like Dzongkha, Timbuktu, you'll see kind of bits and pieces coming together in Dia Man. And while there may be a Chypre Accord, I don't know if I would choose to highlight it. What I will say is the last few words probably describe it perfectly. Tasteful subtlety. So those last two words, I think, describe Dia Man. That's a perfect encapsulation. I do think Dia Man is one of the most perfect office scents ever created, in my opinion. The labdanum kind of gives off this resinous, ambery undertone that can be slightly leathery. So for someone like me who loves leather, I love it when the labdanum kind of comes forward and I can really smell that leathery touch to Dia. And again, very much like how the frankincense weaves its tapestry in and out. It's unique enough so, you know, it won't put people off. So the leathery undertone is weak enough where it's not going to put somebody off in the office, but it's strong enough where you can still kind of pick it up from time to time. So, and for me, I don't care. You know, I wear whatever the hell I want, whenever the hell I want to the office. Like just the other day, I wore Bowmakers. I reviewed Bowmakers on the channel just within the last week. I wore it to the office. I was spraying it in the office around everybody else. And that's Bowmakers with that weird violin varnish accord. So, you know, but for most folks who want to portray this professional image, I would urge you to try Dia Man. Dia Man is a perfect office scent. Now, more details come and go. So as the fragrance dries, you're going to notice that there is a note of plum that you smell. Now, Parfumeur lists plum blossom, interestingly enough. So sometimes I get this very ample plum note, like the plum is realistic and you're literally smelling a plum. You're literally smelling a plum, like you bit into a plum and you're smelling the fruit, okay? Other times, though, the plum blossom seems more logical of a note because of how the floral side of the fragrance smells. So everything in this fragrance to me revolves around the floral heart. So even the other florals are aware and courteous of some of the more gentle floral notes in here, like the peony, for example. How do you create a fragrance around a very soft floral note? It has to be hell. So I'm sure Bertrand Duchaufour racked his brain and this probably took him a long time to create because everything needed to be courteous and aware of everything else. So the ylang-ylang note, just as an example, there's an ylang-ylang note that goes with the peony, but it's dosed with such a subtle, deft hand. It almost adds this texture to Dia Man, even more than the smell. Like you don't get a traditional custardy banana ylang-ylang. No, you just get almost like this texture. I have a hard time picking out the ylang-ylang, I won't lie, but it's there. And even the woods kind of revolve around the florals is what's so crazy about it. So, for example, there's a note of Brazilian rosewood in the base, which, by the way, Brazilian rosewood is heavily regulated now. It's very similar to Mysore sandalwood, like the trees in India, because of how heavily it was harvested, if you will. They almost, you know, Brazil had to come in and put up barriers to people using their rosewood. So unless a Brazilian rosewood tree naturally falls in the forest, they are not allowed to use it, from my understanding. They have to go to elsewhere, other different rosewood sites. But Brazilian rosewood is supposed to be used here, and it's supposed to have this very rich, slightly spicy, but rose-like profile. So it has a little bit of a tint of rose. And when you're smelling that peony, the floral aspect of the Brazilian rosewood with the rose tint mixing with the floral touch of the peony with the ylang-ylang is beautiful. It's a beautiful floral heart. Everything kind of complements everything else, if you will. So the floral aspects of the Brazilian rosewood complement the floral heart beautifully, and you can see the time and effort and energy and thoughtfulness, I would say, that went into Dia Man. Now, the frankincense kind of weaving in and out of everything. Sometimes when you get that frankincense hit, it feels slightly oily. I reviewed a very oily fragrance from the house of Tom Ford called Vert d'Encens. So think about kind of that oily frankincense tilt, if you will. Just imagine the flame in the candle kind of shifting a little bit in the air because someone walks by the candle or just a shift in the breeze or whatever it is, and all of a sudden this oily frankincense is kind of coming your way, and then all of a sudden it goes back and now it's burning clean again. That's the way that the frankincense kind of feels in the fragrance. Now, I recently reviewed a Chypre fragrance from the house of Darren Allen called Chypre No. 1, which, interestingly enough, that was created in the year 1998 by Darren Allen, but it wasn't actually released to the public until the year 2020. Go watch my review of that. Excuse me, if you want a vintage style Chypre done in modern times, but done right, that's definitely one to smell. But when I reviewed it, the reason I bring it up is because it had this creamy coat. It was almost like it was coated in butter, like this creamy butter. And Dia Man has something similar going on to it. There's almost this resinous, creamy, like the resins give it this buttery coating feel. Not as heavy as Chypre number one. Chypre number one's even more heavier in that creamy coating, but it is there. Now, many modern fragrances, so many modern fragrances, and one of the reasons why I don't go crazy about some of the new stuff that comes out. I just let everything come to me, because so much stuff that I smell nowadays falls apart in the heart and in the base, the dry down. Not Dia Man. The dry down somehow almost gets even better. It's like this orris, powdery orris starts to really come through within a couple hours. Oh, it's beautiful. The dry down is, I think the dry down's even better than the opening, which is uncommon nowadays, let's say. Many perfumers and houses don't put the time and energy into creating a proper dry down. So here, and again, one of the reasons such a great office saying, you don't have to reapply this. The dry down is beautiful. And that orris butter and iris becomes very prominent, and it's a very beautiful buttery orris. Slightly powdery. It doesn't really have like the makeup quality of Dior Homme, but there is maybe a slight cosmetic hint, but more like powders. Imagine turning slightly powdery, and this luxurious vetiver joins the party. It's almost like the vetiver is flourishing on a beautiful day. Like the window's right here, and you can just see fields of vetiver growing, and growing to its heart's content. You know, it has everything it needs to flourish and grow. The vetiver here isn't too smoky or too dark. It's almost like a dry, well-balanced vetiver, perfectly balanced. You get little hints of citruses here and there, lots of lush greenery, but the dry down, the vetiver and the patchouli kind of tag team the dry down to give it a bit of this earthiness. And what it ends up happening is that the dry down, in a Chypre construction where the oak moss should be, okay, it's almost like the earthy vetiver, which takes the lead over the patchouli. The patchouli's there, but the earthy vetiver kind of takes the lead. And there's also, so basically what happens is the patchouli and the vetiver kind of replace that oak moss that should add texture and longevity to the fragrance. Vetiver and patchouli have been kind of used as a replacement, if you will. And the labdanum here, which is usually in the base, Bertrand Duchaufour loves literally turning stuff on his head. So the labdanum is in the top. So when you first spray, you're going to get that leathery, resinous, kind of sticky feeling labdanum right away along with the spices. But it's also in the dry down. It feels like there are some resins in the dry down, almost like he used it in the top and the base, but it's not listed as an actual base note, if that makes sense. So now let's talk about some fears of the future of Dia Man, because if you actually go to Amouage's website right now, Dia Man is actually still listed on the Amouage website, but I only see, I was going to say I only see a 50 mil, but there's actually, you have to click on a separate page to get to the 100 mil. But, so apparently there is both a 100 and a 50 mil. When I was looking at it, it only showed me the 50 mil. Their website is so screwed up. Either way, I'm always worried about the fish man destroying the future of Amouage. And these older Amouages, you know, it's kind of one of those things where I'm always fearful, and that's why I have two bottles. I'm always fearful of what he is going to do to some of my all-time favorites. And you know, I love a fragrance a lot if I've decided to back it up. And this is one of those situations where I felt like a backup was in order. I love wearing this stuff to the office. It's just a elegant, unique, luxurious fragrance. You cannot go wrong with Dia Man if you're really trying to make a proper impression on somebody. And it's an Amouage that kind of stands apart from the other Amouages, but not because of its power and strength and beast modeness. That would be something like Interlude, but for the opposite reason of that. It's almost like the anti-Amouage, you know? And if you're a fan of Bertrand Duchaufour's work, or which most people who love perfumery love Bertrand Duchaufour, then Dia Man should be on your to sniff list for sure. And don't just spray, you know, sniff. You have to really wear this. Let it mix with your body. Let it warm up when you move around and all that stuff. It's one day from July 4th. I'm wearing it in the heat. It works beautifully in the heat. I'm telling you. You can also wear this in the cold, but I like wearing it better in the heat. It warms it up a little bit somehow. It makes those oily, melty, sort of, you know, the candle waxy elements of Dia Man come out and shine, especially on a beautiful day like today. I think it's just lovely. This would be a Hall of Fame review if I did Hall of Fame reviews for Amouage, but I do think it's worthy of every fraghead's time. So woody, spicy, brilliant. So thank you for watching. Thank you to everyone who got us to 9,000 subscribers. There will be a special list video or two coming out very soon. I've been working very hard on it. It's just only so much time in one RAM. So I appreciate everyone watching. It's a pleasure as always. Cheers, guys, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.